I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. From this moment on, is downhill. There is no more room.
He finds out about migrants who've been convicted of crimes or accused of crimes from the media.
I think the Biden administration can certainly do a lot more at securing the border. It's very simple.
Mayor Adams is calling for changes to New York's sanctuary city law in order to deport migrants who commit violent crimes.
They cannot work to provide themselves. We have to provide food, shelter, clothing, cleaning, education, health care.
NYC migrant crisis. Tens of thousands of new people usually move to the city every year. However, since the spring of 2022, the number has been climbing very swiftly. After entering across the U.S.-Mexico border, more than 118,000 migrants and asylum seekers, the majority of whom are from Latin American and Caribbean nations, have arrived. By historical standards, the migration wave is not unprecedented. The city's population increased by around 500,000 foreign migrants between 2010 and 2019. However, city services are still being burdened by the latest spike. With few resources upon arrival, today's migrants have had to depend more heavily than in the past on the city's shelter system. Approximately two-thirds of the approximately 60,000 recently arrived migrants residing in the city's shelters as of September were families with children. Their sheer size has forced officials to declare a state of emergency and put severe financial strain on New York City, costing it more than $1 billion thus far. Housing costs are expected to exceed $4.3 billion by July 2024, according to some estimates. Although this is a substantial sum, it would represent less than 5% of New York's fiscal year 2022 budget. There is a shortage of legal assistance for asylum seekers as well. A minimum of 6 months must pass before an asylum applicant is granted a work visa. Numerous freshly arrived migrants are either unable to locate legal assistance to begin the asylum application process or are currently in the process but are unable to obtain employment. Although not to the same extent as New York City, other cities experiencing a rise in migrant populations include Chicago, El Paso, Texas, and San Diego. Numerous push forces exist within Latin America that propel migrants towards the north. There are the well-known crises to start with. Over 7 million people have left Venezuela as a result of the country's economy collapsing under President Nicolas Maduro's authoritarian rule. Over 2 million people have fled Haiti as a result of ongoing gang warfare and the country's aftermath from the 2010 earthquake. And 1 million people have left the island as a result of Cuba's economy becoming more and more dysfunctional. In addition, there is the ordinary dysfunction of poorly run market economies and states, which includes things like hunger and poverty in southern Mexico and northern Central America, an increase in criminal violence, especially in Ecuador, and natural disasters brought on by climate change. Most migrants from Latin America have settled in the region, but as economic possibilities become scarcer, an increasing number of them are increasingly moving to the U.S. The expansion in both legal and illicit cross-border firms, which are now international, multi-million-dollar operations, and the increasing amount of information on social media regarding pay and labor shortages in the U.S. are other factors pushing migration. While U.S. foreign policy can be helpful in lessening the severity of these forces, it is unlikely to be able to resolve long-term economic issues and unsolvable crises.
Flux of single men, and a lot of these men are young. They're between 18 and in their early 20s.
I think the Biden administration can certainly do a lot more at securing the border. It's very simple.
That in the beginning of the migrants coming into New York City, there were a lot of families. There were a lot of mothers and fathers.
Yes, absolutely, there's been an increase, but to see that we are still operating with the mentality of emergency response.
Due to the city's right to shelter requirement, which is being contested in court, New York City is already restricting the cost of hosting migrants and asylum seekers in shelters by evicting single people after 60 days. This is a questionably legal practice. The Joe Biden administration recently granted 472,000 Venezuelans temporary protected status, which enables immigrants whose home countries are dangerous to live, and work in the United States for up to 18 months in an effort to lessen the burden. But in actuality, only the U.S. Congress has the power to alter immigration laws in order to offer long-term answers. Congress may, for starters, shorten the time that applicants for asylum must wait to start the asylum procedure and submit an application for a work permit. A bill to shorten the waiting period to 30 days was submitted in March by U.S. Representative Chellie Pingree. Another issue is that there is not enough staff at the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Office of the Department of Homeland Security to handle the backlog of work authorization cases. This means that immigrants, whether or not they are seeking asylum, may have to wait up to 20 months for documents. USVIZ is an agency that has to rely on fees to fund itself as Congress does not allocate funds to it. Despite the fact that labor shortages exist across the country in the manufacturing of durable products, leisure and hospitality, food and health services, immigrants in New York are forced to either stay living in the city or seek employment elsewhere due to backlog bureaucracy. The backlog of asylum claims in immigration courts, which results in average wait times of 4 to 5 years, doesn't help either. Senior scholar at the Migration Policy Institute, Muzaffar Chisti, has suggested granting asylum officers stationed at the southern U.S. border the authority to decide asylum claims. Even with an appeals process, this procedure would take months rather than years. There is now no consensus on immigration reform in the U.S. Republicans in Congress charge Democrats of supporting open borders, and as a political publicity ploy, the Republican governors of Florida and Texas have bused migrants and asylum seekers to Democratic-led northern cities like Washington, D.C. for millions of dollars. For instance, more than 13,000 migrants were bused from Texas to New York in the past year.
As you know, the city's already been spending millions of dollars to care for the influx of migrants that have entered the city.
In many of the cities, like New York, that have taken in a huge amount of migrants, and really have been a lot, crime has gone down quite considerably.
We are being overwhelmed. There is no word to describe this except invasion.
This is a national crisis, but on the local level, the mayor of New York City has a new plan to help migrants with the cost of food.
On the other hand, Democrats have engaged in lengthy discussions over border policy. Paradoxically, the border crisis between the U.S. and Mexico has evolved into a pretext for not moving forward with a settlement that would lessen the dysfunction of the immigration system in the U.S. Republicans will have even less motivation to help find a solution as the 2024 presidential election draws closer, since a chaotic border will visually appeal to people and turn them against the ruling party. However, based on the past performance of the Donald Trump administration, merely stepping up border enforcement is not a solution. Despite waging a harsh deterrent campaign, migrants and asylum seekers escaping dire circumstances continue to pour into the southern U.S. border in significant numbers. In order to move forward, the U.S. needs comprehensive immigration reform that increases the number of legal entry points available to immigrants. With so few avenues available at the moment, many see filing asylum applications as their only alternative, even if they are unlikely to be granted, thus circumventing the system. In terms of foreign policy, more accommodating regulations are required so that middle-income nations, like those in Latin America, that are having difficulty integrating refugees and asylum seekers into their economies, can be given priority by lending organizations like the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation.
Think that they can help their families. We're already experiencing them going elsewhere and going other places where they can build community.
But the border crisis doesn't just affect those at the border. Cities are continuing to feel the crunch when it...
The magnitude of this migration crisis shouldered almost entirely by the New York City taxpayers.
I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City.
Unveiling the consequences. Although it is not a recent development, immigrants do suffer genuine repercussions from criminalization. Not only are there definite insiders and outsiders, but the present immigration issue also challenges the conventional wisdom that claims low income as others who undermine law and order. Black and brown people are used as scapegoats. Some have even gone so far as to demonize them. During a recent rally, the former president called them physical abusers who are bringing drugs and bringing crime. As a result of his persistent promotion of these poisonous and erroneous notions in his handling of the immigration problem, Mayor Eric Adams of New York City has become an expert at fomenting dread throughout the entire city. Adams adopted his toughest position to date last month, going after unauthorized immigrants who are falsely accused of crimes. Mayor Adams is the only one targeting immigrants' backs in his current attempt to repeal sanctuary laws, which totally ignores the true problem at hand. The language that Mayor Adams is employing raises a number of obvious red flags and is only hurtful to migrants but may incite violence. Adams clearly portrays immigrants as a threat by implying that asylum seekers may cause the city to collapse. To be clear, his comments encourage more ethnic, socioeconomic, and status disparities in the community. The city we knew we're about to lose, Adams continued. The same phrase, losing the city, brings to mind the contentious Trump period, when the president advocated building of a wall between the U.S. and Mexico.
As president, I will carry out the largest domestic deportation operation in American history.
From this moment on is downhill. There is no more room.
To remove Joe Biden's illegals and murderers, because that's what many of them are.
The city will begin imposing curfews on some migrant shelters in the 5 boroughs beginning this week.
A similar rhetoric device is being used by Mayor Adams to prosecute and otherize migrants. These stories are not only poisonous, but they also feed Adams' dangerously erroneous policing apparatus. A few weeks prior, Mayor Adams accompanied NYPD officers on an early morning police raid in the Bronx by donning a ballistic vest on top of his Fendi scarf. The NYPD described the crimes perpetrated by migrants as the largest robbery pattern plaguing the city, and referred to the migrants who committed these crimes as ghost criminals in order to justify the raid. With such exaggerated claims and polarizing terminology, Mayor Adams and the NYPD have been inciting fear around the city to scare residents about what they refer to as the wave of migrant crime.
Since that incident where we saw a group of men assault 2 members of the NYPD.
DA Bragg, why did you not ask for bail? Why didn't you ask for bail for these migrants?
Found obligation is to make sure we have the right people charged with the right crimes.
He finds out about migrants who've been convicted of crimes or accused of crimes from the media.
However, a deeper examination of the data shows that this enormous wave is actually more like a ripple. The fact that New York City's overall crime rate is lower than it was at this time last year is something that Mayor Adams and the NYPD have not stressed enough. In addition, there is a decrease in crime in the areas where migrant shelters are situated. The Daily News reports that key crime categories in Brooklyn's 63rd precinct, home to a significant migrant shelter, have decreased by 7% since February of last year. East Village, Manhattan, has had a 7.5% decrease in crime. The only category that has increased is criminal attack, and even that has only increased by less than 30%, from 19 cases in 2023 to 24 this year. We zeroed in on them because this small number of people are breaking the law and having a huge impact on our public safety, Mayor Adams stated at a recent press conference regarding the immigration situation. Maybe he should untangle the Fendi scarf around his neck, though, so he can see the numerals properly once more.
Mayor Adams is calling for changes to New York's sanctuary city law in order to deport migrants who commit violent crimes.
And then they end up turning, because there's so many of them, they end up turning on the police officers and attacking them.
70,000 migrants are in the city's care at this moment. And like you said, some are staying here at the Row Hotel.
His state limit at the shelter is about to expire this Friday as the city right now.
Instead of spending so much time with the police, he should make the effort to speak with migrants who are truly present if he is the on-the-ground mayor that he so proudly professes to be. Naturally, though, Mayor Adams has no real desire to address the issue. He makes things worse in order to solve problems, similar to when he declared that immigrants do not have the right to shelter and started enforcing 60-day stay limitations, which the city comptroller is currently looking into. Apart from imposing stay limits, Mayor Adams is punishing immigrants once more, this time by enforcing a curfew. More than 3,000 migrants were affected when he imposed an 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew at more than a dozen migrant shelters. The manner in which Mayor Adams criminalized homelessness and mental illness is akin to how he is now marginalizing refugees. On November 29, 2022, Mayor Adams unveiled a proposal that would grant law enforcement and emergency medical personnel the authority to admit homeless individuals to hospitals if they are judged to have mental health problems. As demonstrated by earlier instances, police are now ill-equipped to deal with mental health emergencies. Not only is it cruel to send police to handle these situations, but it also doesn't work. Law and order is not the solution to the immigration dilemma. Housing and infrastructure are. Government representatives and the media should be more careful about the language they use when discussing these topics, since it simply serves to reinforce unfavorable perceptions about immigration. These remarks are not only offensive, but they also serve as fodder for legislation that is quickly changed and could negatively affect the lives of migrants.
It's not just, of course, the data that matters, because this manufactured crisis is at the heart of Donald Trump's monstrous vision for a second term.
Teenagers who are coming here with their mothers. And what we've seen, the video that you just saw, was a migrant crime wave.
This is not going to get better. We put buses there for cooling systems, but it's just not sustainable. They cannot work to provide themselves. We have to provide food, shelter, clothing, cleaning, education, healthcare.
Debunking the myth. The perception of immigrants as contributors to increased crime rates in the U.S. has deep roots in American culture, often serving as a convenient scapegoat for societal problems. Despite widespread belief among Americans that immigration worsens crime, research conducted over the past few decades consistently challenges this notion. While there has been a rise in the number of immigrants in federal prisons over the last decade, experts argue that this data, combined with controversies surrounding unauthorized migrants and law enforcement issues, contributes to the reinforcement of stereotypes about immigrants. High-profile crimes committed by unauthorized individuals can also fuel political agendas. Additionally, isolated incidents of gang activity associated with certain immigrant groups and the complexities of drug trafficking further complicate the public perception. However, recent research in the academic literature has consistently contradicted the association between immigration and criminality. Studies conducted by Butcher and Peel in 1998, Sampson in 2008, Usi and Kubrin in 2009, and Wadsworth in 2010 have all suggested that immigration may actually decrease crime rates in certain areas. For example, Wadsworth's study found that cities experiencing the largest increases in immigration also experienced the largest decreases in homicide and robbery rates during the same period. A notable study published in the Annals of the American Academy of Political and Social Science in 2012, titled Crime and Enforcement in Immigrant Neighborhoods, Evidence from New York City, sheds light on these dynamics at the city level. Authors Garth Davies and Jeffrey Fagan examined whether the relationship between immigration and crime held true specifically for New York City. They analyzed various neighborhood characteristics and found that immigration, when controlling for other factors such as poverty and education levels, actually serves as a protective factor against crime.
That's his only official, he has no official channel with the NYPD, which
Bragg did the right thing by releasing illegal migrants charged with assaulting 2 New York City police officers violently.
Across the 5 boroughs. Originally, this was only for 4 shelters. Now thousands of people are impacted in news.
They say they're looking at this situation. They know this is not the best New York can do. This is not the best the United States can do.
Their findings revealed that neighborhoods with higher immigration rates did not experience higher crime rates. In fact, immigration status alone often correlated with decreased crime rates. Despite this, immigrant neighborhoods faced disproportionately higher levels of law enforcement, particularly among black immigrants who were policed more than twice as much as native citizens, and Latino and Asian immigrants who faced 30% more policing. The study also found that concentrations of foreign-born individuals of African descent were associated with lower total and violent crime rates. Similarly, Latino immigration, which is dominated by Puerto Ricans and Dominicans in New York City, had a negligible effect on total crime and was correlated with slightly less violence. The authors suggest several reasons why immigrants may avoid engaging in criminal behavior, including their strong desire to seize opportunities in the U.S. and their emphasis on family and social ties, which may reinforce traditional values and discourage criminal activity. The research challenges the simplistic and politically expedient narrative that links immigration with crime. It highlights the importance of avoiding scapegoating immigrants and emphasizes the need for more nuanced and evidence-based discussions surrounding immigration policy and enforcement. Brawl in Times Square. There has been a political uproar and revived discussion about a long-standing New York City policy that restricts collaboration between local law enforcement and federal immigration authorities, following the release of a video depicting a group of migrants fighting with police in Times Square. The men are seen kicking police officers on a sidewalk and attempting to rip them off of a man who the police had placed on the ground in the surveillance film, which was obtained on January 27 outside a homeless shelter in Manhattan. In relation to the attack, police have detained 7 people. However, prosecutors have dismissed charges against one person who they believe may not have been involved.
Could land undocumented immigrants accused of a serious crime into the hands of ICE.
Like the individual did a serious crime and then...
And Mayor Eric Adams facing tough questions on what he's doing to fix the migrant situation.
In the past few days, and you've said this multiple times, that you are looking to judges and prosecutors to do the right thing.
Although there were no major injuries, the footage of the cops being beaten has angered many people. After a number of individuals detained were released from custody pending trial, some of that rage has been directed on prosecutors and the legal system. With the tens of thousands of asylum seekers the city has housed in shelters and motels over the past year, New York City officials have been using more and more ominous rhetoric. Immigration advocates claim that some of the remarks are inciting hatred due to the conduct of a few bad apples, which has shocked them. A Venezuelan man wanted in a string of cell phone robberies, Police Commissioner Edward Cabin stated at a news conference on Monday. A wave of migrant crime has washed over our city. He called the accomplices of the suspect ghost criminals, saying they had no social media, no pictures, and no criminal background when they arrived in New York. On Monday, the NYPD published a video that showed Mayor Eric Adams accompanying officers during a raid of a Bronx apartment complex related to that inquiry. An officer warned of migrants preying on vulnerable New Yorkers, and menacing music played as footage of a lady being dragged behind a scooter during a purse robbery was shown. When asked for evidence to support the allegation of a crime wave, police and city authorities said they were unable to do so because the city does not keep track of trends in crime based on the nationality of suspects.
I watched the tape this week. Despicable behavior. It sickened me and outraged me.
And if you're thinking that these are just some Central American no-goodniks, think again.
In Manhattan, we do not tolerate or accept assaults on police officers.
Thieves on scooters have been snatching phones and pocketbooks out of women's hands overnight.
Since the start of the migrant immigration spike 18 months ago, most categories of crime have decreased. The mayor and the NYPD, according to Alexa Aviles, head of the City Council's Immigration Committee, are engaging in the same old Trumpian fear-mongering and the systematic scapegoating of a diverse and vulnerable group of people. I thought there was less crime, Aviles continued. Where is the proof that these claims are true? Adams stated that the great majority of the approximately 175,000 migrants who have arrived in the city are law-abiding during press appearances on Monday. Any New Yorker would be wrong to look at people trying to fulfill the next step on the American dream as criminals, he said. However, Adams has also demonstrated a willingness to back down from a series of regulations that frequently prevent the city from assisting federal efforts to enforce immigration laws in recent days. The moderate Democrat and former police captain Adams referred to the Times Square event as an attack on the foundation of our symbol of safety and urged the city council to think about whether there should be more collaboration with federal immigration agents. He didn't go into detail. Since 2014, unless an individual has been found guilty of a specific violent crime and a court has issued a warrant for their deportation, the police department and municipal jails are not permitted to hold persons in custody on behalf of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. There is no presence of federal immigration authorities within the city's correctional system. It is not authorized for the city to provide resources to aid in the detention and deportation procedure.
Commits a crime against a police officer in the state of New York, and they're not, they've not processed, they're not here legally.
The PD has been extremely busy trying to get them, trying to arrest them.
Every third day, there's a story about some sort of migrant crime. And we're totally unprepared to handle that.
You look behind us, there's a park, there's a YMCA there, we have a charter.
It was unclear at first, according to experts, what impact, if any, the city's alleged sanctuary policy may have had on the cases of the individuals who are alleged to have attacked police in Times Square. When asked by email if they intended to detain the participants in the altercation, an ICE representative did not reply. The release of 5 out of the 6 suspects who were detained has infuriated police authorities. Nonetheless, prosecutors and courts' decisions regarding bail are independent of the city's immigration laws. Alvin Bragg, the district attorney for Manhattan, responded to criticism from the public by saying that his office was still working to make sure that all of the individuals were correctly recognized. According to the Bragg representative, one of the men who was detained was not charged due to inadequate evidence of his involvement. He predicted that more attackers would be taken into custody in the next few days. Beginning on Tuesday, prosecutors will present evidence to a grand jury.
Priority is protecting the people of this state, and anytime there's an assault on a police officer, which is a very serious offense.
It's very simple. If they don't go back to their countries, we will never get back our country.
Now, police say they have arrested 7 people so far, and they're still looking for several more.
We need help. We need help, and it's not going to get any better.
The city's sanctuary laws, according to their supporters, increase public safety by assuring immigrant communities don't fear dealing with the legal system as witnesses or possible victims of crimes, in addition to being criminal defendants. Up to 3,000 persons were detained in New York City a decade ago in order to assist federal immigration authorities in starting detention and deportation procedures. Immigration attorneys stated that in certain instances, police would notify federal officials right once upon an arrest, even before a conviction was obtained. Kenneth Ganello, the director of ICE's field office in New York, stated that it was more difficult to deport criminals because of the city's lack of cooperation during a press conference on Monday that was attended by conservative elected figures. "They've stopped contacting us," he declared. "Hundreds of people are being arrested all over the city, and unfortunately, the media will be the only source of information if we are unable to identify which ones are the most violent."
As opposed to having better plans put in place has been incredibly distressing to see.
Has networks with the FBI, with all these other organizations, with many other police departments, law enforcement.
Could curfews be coming to migrant shelters in the city?
The mayor's office says it's something they're considering.
Federal immigration authorities say 2 of the asylum seekers arrested for attacking New York City police officers recently.
The executive director of the Immigration Coalition, Murad Awawe, issued a warning, stating that the mayor's remarks regarding removing sanctuary protections may send a shiver down the spine of the city's over 500,000 undocumented immigrants. "Why are they stoking the fire right now?" stated Awade. It appears that he is attempting to divert attention from the more pressing problems, which include his current poor administration of the city. Curfew at migrant shelters. New York City's decision to expand curfews to additional migrant shelters has stirred controversy and raised questions about the city's approach to managing its homeless population, particularly among asylum seekers. Mayor Eric Adams' administration announced the imposition of an 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew at 20 migrant shelters, adding to the 4 locations already under such restrictions. The move affects approximately 3,600 migrants, with the largest shelter in Long Island City housing nearly 1,000 individuals. The initial implementation of curfews came in response to neighborhood complaints and concerns about safety following several incidents of violence attributed to residents of migrant shelters. These incidents have garnered national attention, further fueling the debate over immigration policy and the city's responsibility to ensure public safety. City officials argue that the curfews align with existing restrictions in traditional homeless shelters and aim to facilitate more efficient management of shelter capacities. They emphasize the need to prioritize the health and safety of both asylum seekers and local residents. However, critics question the efficacy of such measures and express concerns about their potential impact on vulnerable populations. The decision to expand curfews follows a series of violent incidents involving migrants.
Send them back. You don't touch our police officers.
Starting today, the Mayor Adams administration imposing an 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew at 20 more migrant shelters.
As there's been another clash between migrants and NYPD officers.
Rob other people. This crime ring was being run by a migrant from Venezuela,
including a shooting in Times Square involving a 15-year-old from Venezuela and a viral video showing a brawl between migrants and police. These events have intensified calls for stricter enforcement and raised tensions between city officials, law enforcement, and migrant advocacy groups. Despite the expansion of curfews to 24 shelters, it represents only a fraction of the more than 200 facilities operated by the city to accommodate newly arrived asylum seekers. This raises questions about the scalability of such measures and their long-term effectiveness in addressing underlying issues such as housing insecurity and access to social services. Critics argue that punitive measures like curfews fail to address the root causes of violence and crime within migrant communities. Instead, they advocate for holistic approaches that prioritize support services, mental health resources, and community engagement.
Eric Adams' proposal is to give families prepaid credit cards that they can use to buy food or supplies.
And assaulted and did a robbery. You don't have the right to be in our city.
Any different than providing migrant families with actual food and supplies.
Well, questions being raised tonight about a new pilot program that'll give migrant families a reloadable prepaid credit card.
They emphasize the importance of addressing systemic barriers to integration and fostering inclusive environments that promote social cohesion and mutual respect. There are concerns about the disproportionate impact of curfews on marginalized communities, particularly asylum seekers who may already face challenges accessing housing, employment, and legal assistance. Critics warn against stigmatizing migrants and perpetuating harmful stereotypes that undermine their rights and dignity. In response to growing scrutiny, city officials have defended their actions as necessary steps to maintain public order and address legitimate safety concerns. They point to the complexities of managing a diverse and rapidly growing population of asylum seekers amid limited resources and logistical challenges. However, advocates argue that punitive measures like curfews risk exacerbating social tensions and alienating migrant communities. They call for a more compassionate and rights-based approach that prioritizes collaboration, dialogue, and community empowerment. The expansion of curfews to additional migrant shelters reflects broader debates over immigration policy, public safety, and social justice in New York City. While city officials assert the necessity of such measures in maintaining order and protecting residents, critics raise concerns about their effectiveness, fairness, and impact on vulnerable populations. Moving forward, there is a need for greater collaboration and innovation in addressing the underlying issues driving violence and insecurity within migrant communities. Only through holistic and inclusive approaches can the city truly fulfill its obligations to all its residents, regardless of their immigration status.
Either individually or together with small children. And now what's been happening in the recent months in particular.
Migrants don't want to be in shelter for the rest of their lives. They're here just to get a little bit opportunity to get out.
House resolution this week denouncing what they call President Biden's lax border security.
The country who is dealing with this migrant crisis, and as you said, following these high-profile
prepaid debit cards for migrants. The city of New York recently announced a pilot program aimed at providing migrants with prepaid debit cards specifically designated for purchasing food and baby supplies. Contrary to misinformation circulating on social media, participants will not receive credit cards, but rather prepaid debit cards. The program, which is part of efforts to manage the influx of migrants into the city, aims to streamline aid distribution and cut costs. Social media posts have falsely characterized the program, suggesting that migrants will receive credit cards and implying that it will exacerbate the city's challenges. These claims have gained traction, with thousands of likes and shares, perpetuating misconceptions about the nature of the aid being provided. In reality, Participants in the pilot program will receive prepaid debit cards that can only be used to purchase food and baby supplies at designated retailers such as bodegas, grocery stores, supermarkets, and convenience stores. This restriction ensures that the funds are allocated for essential needs and prevents misuse. The decision to implement prepaid debit cards stems from the city's desire to replace non-perishable food boxes currently provided to migrants with a more efficient and flexible system.
New York City is moving forward with a plan to give prepaid debit cards to migrant families, despite
the mayor's whole plan is to basically replace the already non-perishable food boxes. That
comes to the cost of taking care of tens of thousands of migrants.
And that we need to make sure that we have something where one city bearing the brunt of this doesn't seem fair to me.
Each participant will receive an average daily allowance of $12.52 loaded onto their card for a duration of 28 days. This approach aligns with existing federally funded health and nutrition programs like SNAP and WIC, which utilize similar prepaid cards to distribute benefits. The city has allocated $53 million to the pilot program, emphasizing potential cost savings of $600,000 per month and $7.2 million annually. Additionally, officials hope that directing spending to local retailers will stimulate the economy. Mayor Eric Adams clarified misconceptions during a press conference, emphasizing that the program does not involve issuing American Express credit cards, but rather prepaid debit cards, which operate differently. Prepaid debit cards require funds to be loaded onto them before use, and participants will be required to sign an affidavit affirming that they will use the cards exclusively for purchasing food and baby supplies. Any misuse of the funds may result in removal from the program. Mobility Capital Finance, the company partnering with the city to launch the program, confirmed that the cards are indeed prepaid debit cards, not credit cards. The pilot program is scheduled to begin later this month, with plans for expansion if successful. It represents a concerted effort by the city to address the needs of migrants while ensuring accountability and efficient use of resources. By dispelling misinformation and providing accurate information about the program, the city aims to foster transparency and trust among residents and stakeholders. Pilot Program. New York City is indeed launching a pilot program to provide prepaid debit cards to select migrant families, dispelling misinformation circulating on social media. The program, intended to replace the city's current system of providing non-perishable food boxes to migrant families staying in hotels, aims to offer a more cost-effective and efficient means of support. The initiative will provide 500 migrant families with prepaid debit cards loaded with approximately $12 per person per day for the duration of 28 days. These cards will be restricted for use exclusively at designated types of stores, including bodegas, grocery stores, supermarkets, and convenience stores, where recipients can purchase only food and baby supplies. The restriction is similar to the guidelines governing federal benefit programs like SNAP and WIC, ensuring that the funds are allocated for essential needs.
To buy food and baby supplies.
All right, it would replace the food boxes given to asylum seekers staying in hotels.
And a coalition for the homeless signed an agreement that the city would provide shelter to anyone who seeks it.
In which many of the accused suspects are newly arrived asylum seekers.
the city is providing to migrants, single adult migrants and migrant families that are staying in hotels like this.
The decision to implement prepaid debit cards comes as a response to logistical challenges and financial burdens associated with the previous food distribution system. By providing migrants with prepaid cards, the city anticipates significant cost savings estimated at $600,000 per month and $7.2 million per year. Additionally, the program is expected to offer greater flexibility and autonomy to recipients, allowing them to choose the food and supplies that best meet their needs. It's essential to note that participation in the program comes with accountability measures. Families involved will be required to sign an affidavit affirming their intention to use the card solely for the intended purposes of purchasing food and baby supplies. Any violation of these terms may result in removal from the pilot program. The prepaid cards, administered through a partnership with financial technology company MoKFi, operate similarly to EBT cards used in federal benefits programs. However, they are specifically restricted for purchasing food and baby supplies, with usage limited to designating merchant categories to prevent misuse.
whatever country they came from and return them there, and then that's the responsibility of ICE.
During a curfew that is already in place for traditional homeless services shelters across the city.
That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.